Oh, man.
Yo, maniacs, listen up. Tonight is the night of all.
The sun's silence breaks. A heartfelt farewell goes viral. In the wake of the heartbreaking news of professional wrestling icon Hulk Hogan's death, tributes have surged in from across the globe, spanning from wrestling superstars to lifelong fans. Yet none have resonated more deeply than the emotional message shared by his only son, Nick Hogan. The statement, first posted on Nick's social media accounts, offered a rare glimpse behind the curtain of a family often in the public eye, but rarely this vulnerable. Nick began his tribute with the words, "Thank you for being my dad, my hero, my protector, and my teacher," paired with a poignant childhood photo of him perched on his father's powerful shoulders, both of them grinning in a moment of pure joy. This single post sparked a wave of responses, racking up millions of interactions within hours. Celebrities, wrestling fans, and members of the public filled the comments with their own memories of Hulk Hogan, while wrestling legends like Ric Flair and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson publicly acknowledged Nick's words as both powerful and deeply moving. While many public figures offer carefully crafted condolences, Nick's tribute stood out for its honesty. "You weren't perfect, but you were always real," he wrote, striking a balance between admiration and vulnerability. The post shed light on the side of Hulk Hogan that the world rarely saw, not the performer in the ring, but the father who provided strength through presence, through love, and through flaws. In doing so, Nick not only mourned a larger-than-life figure, but revealed the deeply human loss of a son saying goodbye to his dad. A childhood in the spotlight, growing up Hogan. Nick Hogan's tribute gains even more emotional weight when placed in the context of his unique upbringing, growing up as the son of one of the most recognizable figures in professional wrestling history. Born Nicholas Allen Belia, Nick spent much of his early life in front of cameras, both in the roaring arenas where his father performed and later in their home through the reality series Hogan Knows Best. The show, which aired in the mid-2000s, gave audiences a front-row seat to the dynamics within the Hogan family, moments of affection, discipline, laughter, and the very real challenges of balancing celebrity and parenthood. Viewers witnessed a playful and protective Hulk Hogan guiding his children, including Nick, with a surprising tenderness that often contrasted his larger-than-life wrestling persona. Yet fame didn't shield the family from turmoil. In 2007, Nick was involved in a high-profile car crash that left his best friend critically injured and brought intense media scrutiny upon the Hogan family. Legal battles, public criticism, and emotional breakdowns followed. But even through the darkest chapters, Hulk Hogan remained physically and emotionally present, attending court hearings, offering unwavering support during jail time, and speaking out to protect and guide his son. In later interviews, Nick would reflect on those painful years, crediting his father as the reason he was able to stay grounded amid chaos. "He didn't give up on me when the world did," Nick once told a magazine, revealing a side of Hulk Hogan many fans didn't fully know, a father who fought for redemption, not in the ring, but in his own home. These formative experiences created a bond shaped not just by fame, but by resilience. Nick's tribute, therefore, isn't just a farewell. It's an echo of years spent learning from a man who was both superhero and human, a father who taught life lessons through example, even in times of personal collapse. The journey from boy to man in the shadow of Hulk Hogan was never easy, but it was undeniably shaped by love, pain, and ultimately deep respect. A tribute that touched the world. Raw words, real love. When Nick Hogan posted his heartfelt tribute online, he likely had no idea just how profoundly it would resonate with people across generations and continents. His words, simple yet deeply moving, offered a rare public moment of authenticity from the child of a global superstar. In a world often dominated by carefully filtered grief and PR-managed condolences, Nick's message felt like a punch to the heart, not rehearsed, not polished, but raw and real. "You taught me to fight, not just in the ring, but in life," he wrote, recalling lessons passed down through shared hardships rather than glamorous victories. He acknowledged the emotional complexity of their relationship without hesitation, reflecting on the imperfections that came with loving a man who was never off stage, even at home. "You taught me how to be strong even when I felt broken. Most of all, you taught me that love means showing up even when it's hard." These words not only captured the essence of their father-son relationship, but also echoed the experiences of countless others who have loved imperfectly and lost painfully. Tributes poured in across social platforms, not only from fans, but from some of the biggest names in entertainment and sports. Ric Flair publicly called it a beautiful tribute to a man who meant so much to so many. while Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson commented, "Nick, your dad was a warrior, and clearly so are you." What made Nick's post remarkable wasn't just its emotional resonance, it was its honesty. He didn't attempt to canonize his father. Instead, he humanized him. The legend who body-slammed giants and captivated millions was to Nick a man who showed up when it mattered most. It was this brutal vulnerability that turned the post into more than a personal farewell. It became a universal reflection on family, fatherhood, and the unspoken bonds that define our most important relationships. In paying tribute to the man behind the muscles and the myth, Nick Hogan gave the world something far more enduring than a eulogy. He gave it truth. Final goodbyes, the eulogy that silenced the room. At Hulk Hogan's private funeral ceremony, a somber atmosphere blanketed the room as family, close friends, and wrestling royalty gathered not to honor the legend, but to grieve the man. The air was heavy, not with grandeur or spectacle, but with an intimate sorrow that seemed to defy the larger-than-life persona Terry Giambolia had embodied for decades. It was here, amidst the muffled sobs and tear-streaked faces, that Nick Hogan stood before the crowd to deliver what would become one of the most emotionally charged moments of the day, a eulogy so honest and heartfelt, it rendered even the most seasoned wrestlers speechless. "He was larger than life, but he was also just my dad," Nick began, his voice trembling as silence swept across the room. "Now that he's gone, I feel small, but I know he'd want me to stand tall." For a man who had spent his entire life under the intense spotlight of fame, Nick suddenly became the anchor of the room, not with bravado or showmanship, but with vulnerable truth. He spoke not of championships or iconic matches, but of quiet memories, fishing trips, late-night talks, and whispered encouragement during his most difficult times. Sitting in the front row beside his sister Brooke and their mother Linda, Nick represented a family that had weathered intense public scrutiny, personal tragedies, and years of emotional distance. And yet, in that moment, they were united, raw, open, and fiercely devoted to remembering the man they knew off camera. Stories shared that day painted Hulk Hogan not as the flamboyant icon of WrestleMania, but as a father who told the same embarrassing dad jokes, who limped home after brutal matches, and who still found the strength to be present when his children needed him. The funeral wasn't filled with the roar of crowds or the echo of theme songs. It was filled with silence, memory, and the echo of love. Nick's eulogy didn't just honor a wrestling legend. It crystallized the simple truth that no spotlight can outshine the love between a father and a son. It was not the final act of a celebrity farewell. It was the closing chapter of a father's story told by the child who knew him best. The man behind the curtain, a father beyond fame. While most of the world remembers Hulk Hogan as the boisterous showman who ripped shirts in the ring and delivered unforgettable catchphrases, Nick Hogan's tribute peeled back the layers to reveal a vastly different figure, one known only to those closest to him. In his emotional message, Nick gave voice to a version of his father that the cameras never captured, a version not draped in championship gold, but wrapped in quiet strength. This was a man who limped through the front door after brutal matches but still made time to ask about homework, who showed up when the world turned its back, who offered not wrestling advice but life wisdom in whispers over late-night talks. "Thank you for being my rock, even when yours was crumbling," Nick wrote, exposing the deeply human truth that even heroes have limits and even the strongest men break. "Thank you for showing me that strength doesn't always look like muscles and bravado. Sometimes it's admitting when you're wrong. Sometimes it's just showing up." Those words echoed in the hearts of countless readers as they painted a portrait of a father who was never perfect, but who loved deeply, consistently, and fiercely. This side of Hulk Hogan was never featured on TV or immortalized in action figures. It existed in the quiet spaces between performances, in the kitchen talks, in the gentle discipline, and in the unconditional presence of a dad who gave his children the confidence to stand on their own. Even amid scandals, setbacks, and public pressure, Hulk Hogan remained deeply committed to his family. Nick's words served as a reminder that no matter how iconic the public persona, the truest legacies are formed in the ordinary. They're built not on spotlight moments, but on the consistency of love and the courage to show up in silence. This intimate portrayal reshaped the narrative of Hulk Hogan, allowing the world to see beyond the legend and into the soul of the man. A father who understood that his greatest legacy wouldn't be in the record books, but in the strength and values he instilled in his children. For Nick, this wasn't about rewriting history. It was about telling the truth that had always been there, waiting to be heard. Imperfect, unshakable. a complicated bond forged in fire. In his tribute, Nick Hogan never attempted to paint his relationship with his father in flawless strokes. Instead, he leaned into the messiness, the complexities, and the wounds that shaped their connection over the years. It was this candidness that made his words resonate so profoundly. The bond between Nick and Hulk Hogan, real name Terry Gene Bollea, was forged not just in affection and admiration, but through storms that tested every thread of their relationship. Public scandals, legal troubles, media invasions, and periods of emotional distance all left marks that couldn't be erased by fame or legacy. Most notably, the 2007 car accident that left Nick entangled in legal battles and his friend permanently injured cast a long shadow over the family. It was a time that exposed the vulnerabilities of their household to the entire world. Yet, despite the chaos, Hulk Hogan remained by his son's side, not as a celebrity shielding his image, but as a father refusing to let go. Nick acknowledged this openly, writing not only about his father's public loyalty, but about the private, quiet moments where love did the heavy lifting. "I saw you stumble. I saw you break. I saw you stand up again," he wrote. "You never stopped fighting. For your career, for our family, and for yourself. That's the legacy I'll carry." These aren't the words of someone idolizing a myth. They're the words of someone who walked beside a man, saw him fall, and loved him anyway. In this honest reckoning, Nick reminded the world that unconditional love doesn't require perfection. In fact, it often finds its deepest roots in shared pain and mutual healing. For every headline that once tore their family apart, this tribute stitched together a narrative of redemption and resilience. It showed that even when father and son grew apart, they found their way back, not because they had to, but because the love between them demanded it. That's what made their relationship powerful. Not its glamour, not its visibility, but its ability to withstand the kind of pressure that would shatter most families. Nick Hogan's words told a story not just of grief, but of forgiveness, of hard-won understanding, and of a love that didn't just survive the fire. It was tempered by it. Legacy in the quiet moments, more than just a legend. For decades, Hulk Hogan was synonymous with larger-than-life energy, colorful charisma, and unforgettable wrestling moments that define a generation. But as the public continues to share clips of him slamming giants and delivering iconic promos, Nick Hogan's tribute shifts the focus from the spectacle to the soul. In a world obsessed with perfect optics and polished narratives, Nick reminded us that the true legacy of a man is often found not in what he does under bright lights, but in what he does when no one is watching. "I used to think you were immortal," Nick wrote. "Now I realize your immortality is in what you left behind, not just in the ring, but in me." Those words reframed the wrestling icon's legacy through the lens of fatherhood. They spoke of the man who clapped the loudest at school plays, who gave the same embarrassing dad jokes over dinner, who showed up when it mattered, even when the world expected him to disappear. Nick's message reveals that what endures isn't the roar of the crowd, but the quiet affirmations, the bedtime talks, the resilience taught in the face of failure. These were the foundations of a deeper, quieter kind of greatness. Hulk Hogan, for all his championship belts and magazine covers, left his most profound mark not in the squared circle, but in the values and strength he passed down to his son. He taught Nick that real strength isn't about dominance or image, it's about consistency, humility, and presence. The fishing trips, the car rides, the private encouragement after a bad day, these were the unseen matches he won time and again. And it's these moments that Nick now holds closest. The tribute doesn't ask us to forget the showman. It simply invites us to see the man behind the myth. In doing so, it becomes clear that Hulk Hogan's most enduring legacy isn't tied to wrestling history. It lives on in the quiet, in the personal, and in the hearts of those who truly knew him. Nick's words aren't just a farewell, they're a handoff. They carry the torch of a man who once stood as a giant and now lives on in the way his son walks through the world, carrying both his father's name and his example forward with quiet pride. The final bell, a son's promise to carry on. As the world mourns the passing of Hulk Hogan through grand tributes, television specials, and public memorials planned by wrestling organizations and entertainment networks, the most poignant and enduring homage may already have been spoken, not in a roaring stadium, but in the soft and sorrowful words of a son. Nick Hogan's final message to his father resonates as a personal vow, a mission to live a life that honors the values Hulk tried to instill away from cameras and championship belts. "Rest easy, Dad. I'll carry your legacy with pride and your love in my heart forever," he wrote. an intimate promise that trans celebrity grief and speaks to something deeply human, the desire to make those who raised us proud. For Nick, that legacy won't be measured in the number of tribute posts or documentaries released. It will be in his effort to be the kind of man his father was at his best, a man who showed up when it was hardest, who owned his mistakes, who lifted others even when he himself was falling. That is the torch Nick has chosen to carry. In a world where strength is often confused with perfection, he now becomes a living reminder that real strength is shaped through adversity, humility, and love. In the days and months ahead, fans will celebrate Hulk Hogan's historic moments in the ring, slamming Andre the Giant, headlining WrestleMania, and changing the face of pop culture. But Nick's promise ensures that the man behind the legend, the father who cheered at school events, who whispered support after heartbreaks, who stayed through every storm, will not be forgotten. Behind every superstar is a family. Behind every superhero is someone's dad, Nick's tribute reminded us. And in doing so, he reframed the way the world remembers Hulk Hogan, not just as an icon of entertainment, but as a flawed, loving, deeply human father whose greatest match was fought outside the ring, in the hearts of those he loved. The red and yellow gear may be folded, and the voice that once bellowed, "What you gonna do, brother?" may be silent, but the impact remains, etched not in gold belts, but in the soul of a son who now walks taller in memory of the man who taught him how. The final bell may have rung, but the story continues, in Nick, in their bond, and in a legacy that no crowd can ever fully measure. The final bell. When legends rest, love speaks loudest. In the days since Hulk Hogan's passing, the global wrestling community has echoed with commemorations worthy of a man who helped shape the very identity of sports entertainment. Yet among the banners, throwback reels, and Hall of Fame speeches, Nick Hogan's personal promise stands tallest, not for its grandeur, but for its soul. While organizations prepare tributes and fans revisit highlight reels of body slams and backstage interviews, Nick's message brings a finality that is uniquely human, a son coming to terms with the silence left behind by his father's absence. He isn't trying to compete with the noise of public remembrance. Instead, his voice emerges as the emotional underscore to a life that was as tender in private as it was explosive in public. Nick's tribute speaks less of legacies carved in metal and more of ones built through late-night talks, road trip wisdom, and whispered encouragement through closed doors. "You always had my back, even when the world didn't," he wrote, not as a catchphrase, but as a truth earned through fire. The arena is quiet now, the ring ropes still, and the famous voice that once energized millions no longer echoes through packed coliseums. But Nick understands what lives on. "Your impact wasn't just in the spotlight," he said. "It's in the way I love, the way I fight, the way I keep going." That sentiment, tucked gently into his farewell, becomes a new kind of anthem, one not chanted by fans but carried quietly through the lives Hogan influenced. At its heart, the final bell for Hulk Hogan isn't just the end of a career. It marks the transition of a legacy from performance to principle. Nick now becomes the steward of that legacy, not through championships, but by embodying the strength, humility, and heart his father showed behind the scenes. In doing so, he reminds the world that the most enduring influence a man can have isn't on a global stage. It's in how he teaches those he loves to stand tall when he's no longer there to catch them. That's where the real immortality lies, not in muscle, fame, or slogans, but in a son's unshakable vow to continue walking with the strength of the man who raised him. So while the crowd fades and the costumes retire, one truth remains. Hulk Hogan's greatest legacy is not just what he left behind, but who. Closing lines. The man, the myth, the dad. As the final curtain gently falls on the life of Hulk Hogan, it's not the roar of the crowd or the flash of pyrotechnics that lingers. It's the quiet hum of memory, the unshakable presence of love, and the reverberation of a son's promise to carry forward a legacy built not just in steel cages and stadiums, but in living rooms. In the end, what endures isn't the record of title wins or the viral clips of match-ending leg drops. It's the impact left in the hearts of those who truly knew him. Nick Hogan, through his deeply personal and remarkably open tribute, didn't just remind the world who Hulk Hogan was, he redefined it. He reframed the image of the legend, stripping away the bandanas, the spotlight, and the slogans to reveal the man who helped him through heartbreak, who taught him how to fight without fists, and who loved even when it was hard. "Thank you for being my forever hero," Nick wrote, a line so simple yet so weighty. It captures not just grief, but the full measure of a life shared between father and son. And in those few words, the decades of celebrity, controversy, and triumph were reduced to their essence, a relationship filled with humanity, one that struggled, healed, and ultimately endured. In a time when so many legacies are curated and scripted, Nick's raw honesty offered something rare, a tribute not to the perfection of a myth, but to the resilience of love. To fans, Hulk Hogan may always be the man who shaped their childhoods, the face of a golden age, the indomitable force who made wrestling larger than life. But to Nick, he was simply Dad, flawed, tender, proud, and irreplaceable. And as he steps forward into life without him, Nick becomes more than just a son in mourning. He becomes a vessel of everything his father stood for at his best. Not as a performer, not as a public figure, but as a father who tried, who failed, who showed up, and who loved. And that is the truest legacy of all. So while the red and yellow may never again fly from the rafters, and the immortal voice that once shouted, "What you gonna do, brother?" has gone still, what remains is far more powerful. It's in the memories carried by his family. It's in the quiet strength of his son. And it's in the hearts of those who now understand that behind every icon there is a man. Behind every superstar, a family. And behind every legend, a love that never dies.